Hello and welcome to The Stack. This week's show has a cinematic touch to it. We've touched down in Venice to speak with Karen Krizanovich on how the media is paying more and more attention to the Venice Film Festival. We talk with Tony Nourmand about the art of film posters and Auste Skrupiskit on Playground magazine. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We start the show talking about the film press, and more importantly, how it is paying more and more attention to the Venice Film Festival that started this week. I managed to caught up in studio with film critic and Monocle Radio's special regular voice, Karen Krizanovich, on the increasing appeal of the festival, its comparisons with Cannes, and of course, which films she's looking forward to see it there. Here is Karen with more.
I'm a relative newcomer to the Venice Film Festival. I just started, this is maybe my second or third year, and I've always wanted to go, but it seemed out of my reach. You'd hear about it, but it seemed a little mysterious. And I think that mystery is being evaporated or maybe enhanced by the amount of media coverage it's getting.
And how would you compare to Cannes? I know you are a veteran of Cannes, I can say that. You've been there many times. We need to do a little comparisons. I think even the French press is doing a lot of articles on that. Give me the comparisons. I'm sure they're both very good.
Well, they're both very good in their own way. Both of them have directors that really like to court controversy. They know how to pitch something so it kind of makes you intrigued and engaged and slightly angry. but also thinking, maybe they have a point. So I think it's important that both of these, long-lived, very visible and visual festivals, very high profile, both of them, have directors that can really steer them into the public eye and into areas that they wouldn't normally go into. I think the difference between Cannes and Venice is Cannes is a little more, I don't want to say glitzy, but I want to say it's a little more Hollywood in the very overt sense. Some people say it can be a little on the trashy side. It can be a little, look at me, look at me. Whereas Venice isn't like that. Venice is, look at me, I am chic. Venice is elegant. It's less hysterical. But the enthusiasm is there too. And I think people go to Cannes because it's a place to be. Because Cannes, I hadn't realized, is a convention center throughout the rest of the year. I mean, all sorts of people go there. Property people, and Duty Free has a meeting there every year. Who knew? So it's a real convention center, whereas the Lido, where the Venice Biennale for Cinema is held, is really a family suburb. It's a long island with beautiful beach, and there's a lot of families there during the festival. And the Palais Biennale, which is sort of the central area where the screenings are, that's where the red carpet is. So you don't get a lot of day trippers or people think, I'm just going to go, because it takes effort to get to Lido. So we really have a much more selective group of stars, and also I think of people that are really keen on cinema.
And, if you're the owner of a newspaper, even in the US, where you're from, Karen, do you think it's worth, covering the event as much as can? Do you sense that the industry, the press is interested in Venice as well?
I think the press is more interested in Venice from a quality standpoint, and that's not casting aspersions on what Cannes has. Venice is more looking forward to the Oscars. It's one of the last big festivals before Toronto, which is big. And a lot of people go to Toronto because they don't have to cross big water from the States and from North America. I think it's a much more measured, glamorous adult festival, although there's a lot of excitement there with the stars this year.
I mean, there are a lot of stars. Let's talk about the lineup. I mean, you sent me a few notes. I mean, there's so many to name it here.
It's huge. Okay, the first year I went was post-pandemic, and they were still just recovering. Cannes was the same, and Berlin as well, which, a lot of people didn't go. They didn't want to wear masks. They didn't want to be tested. It was difficult to get into screenings. 2023, of course, we had the strikes. That means stars, directors couldn't show up, and writers couldn't show up either. So that was really difficult. And some films were pulled because the stars weren't there to promote them. We don't realize how important the red carpet is to the ecosystem of film promotion, making us aware of these things. But in 2024, it's like they've just pulled out the stops. It's very exciting. It's got a great measure of art house and also commercial. We've got George Clooney, Angelina Jolie. We've got Nicole Kidman in a film that's very difficult to get tickets to. I mean, I'm sitting in the public.
I'm
Daniel
dying
Craig.
to watch her film, Baby Girl.
Everybody wants a ticket to that. Kate Blanchett, Brad Pitt, Joaquin Phoenix, and Lady Gaga. And it's just, I mean, that's just a few. We're going to have Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Jenny Ortega, Willem Dafoe, Monica Bellucci. I mean, you name it. They're all going to be there. And they'll probably all swan in on a small boat underneath
a gondola?
small... No, probably a Riva boat, which are those beautiful redwood boats that you see coming through the lagoon.
And what films are you looking forward to see it?
Okay, well, I have got tickets to Beetlejuice, which is Tim Burton's sequel to the great Beetlejuice, and it's got the same cast: Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Jenny Ortega as the sort of the young Winona Ryder, Willem Dafoe and Monica Bellucci, as I said before, John Watts' drama Wolves, not Wolves, starring Brad Pitt and George Clooney. But also there's Todd Phillips' Joker Folie à Deux, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, and it's a musical.
That could go either way, right? I have no idea what to expect.
But, you know, with Cannes, there were a couple films in Cannes that were musicals but worked really well. There was one with Zoe Saldana, who... her native language is Spanish, and she sings and she acts and she looks great. So let's hope it's going to go this way. We've also got Luca Guadagnino's Queer, which apparently has been finished for a few years. Now, Luca loves Venice, he loves Lido, and it loves him back. So I can't imagine a Venice without him. We've also got The Brutalist with Adrian Brody, Justin Kurzel's The Order with Jude Law, and one of the ones that I'm really looking forward to is Pablo Larraín's Maria. It's about Maria Callas. And people are going, I don't even know who Maria Callas is. How could you not? It's going to be amazing because she had just the most interesting, the most engaging, the most exciting, the most tragic life.
And Angelina Jolie, it's been a while since she's being actually on the big screen, like as a main character of a film, right?
This is going to be her opportunity to really portray. I mean, she's been in so many dramatic films and adventure films, but this is going to be a biopic. And I mean, not that she hasn't done those before, but I think this is really a chance to see her. And we haven't seen her for a while, so it's a good opportunity.
And I think, as you mentioned before, post-Venice, so when you're back, we might need to have another conversation about the Oscars. Because as you said, I think Venice is kind of, you have to look at Venice to see what's going to be nominated in January, right?
It's going to be the European influence, the global influence. These are going to be the forerunners, although a lot of films will have come from Cannes. And some of the choices for the Oscars, foreign films, have come from Cannes. And I think, well, why that one? I say to myself. But also, let's not forget TV, because we've also got Alfonso Cuarón's, I think it's 8-part TV series, Disclaimer, starring Kate Blanchett. And he said, actually, Barbera, who's the director of the Venice Film Festival, said that episode 4 is erotically shocking.
I'm in.
I'm trying to figure out what that's going to be.
Listen, Karen, what a pleasure. And by the way, if you're there, if you pick up any print titles you find there, because you know that I love those industry titles like around town as well.
I'll bring them all back for you.
Thank you very much. Karen Krizanovich there, and stay tuned for more reports by Karen from the Venice Film Festival. And we continue in the topic of movies. This time, let's look at the art of the movie poster. And no one better to discuss this with me than Tony Nourmand, founder of Real Art Press, and editor and publisher of 1001 Movie Posters, a comprehensive collection of iconic film posters. Coincidentally enough, during the interview, I was wearing a t-shirt featuring the poster of one of my favorite films, The Endless Summer from 1966. Of course, that poster is also featured in the book. It was great meeting Tony. He first tells me when he started to fall in love with the art form.
I was born in Iran, and when I was 4 or 5, as soon as I could go to the cinema, my uncle and my dad every weekend used to take me to the cinema. And there it wasn't like it is here. You know, you would know the cinema owner and everyone would say hello. And so after the movie was over, my uncle would go upstairs to have a drink or a coffee with his friend who was the manager. And because I was 4 or 5, they used to say to me, oh, just go into the back room. There are lots of movie posters there. Pick what you want. So I would go there, rummage around, pick what I wanted, go back home, pin it on my wall. Following week, it would happen again and again. Anyway, I moved here. I went to school. And in 1979, I bought my first movie poster. It was in a shop called the Vintage Magazine Shop in Soho, which is no longer there. I just happened to walk in, and they had an original poster for Apocalypse Now, which is I'd seen it like a year earlier. And I thought, wow, you can buy an original poster. So I bought it. And I remember having this feeling of, wow, this is original. It was a big thing for me. I went to art school. I wanted to make movies. I raised money to make a feature film, which never happened, because I didn't know what I was doing. But at that time, I found the phone number of a guy in San Francisco who sold movie posters. So I rang him up, and then we had a nice chat, and he had a couple of things I really wanted. So I ordered my first credit card, and I started buying posters then. And then I would speak to people. Somebody would want to buy a movie poster. I would call this guy, buy it, add something to it, sell it to whoever wanted to buy it. And I remember I was unemployed. It was around 1990. I couldn't, I was looking for work. The phone rang, and there was this woman called Carrie Wallace from Christie's. And they had been consigned a very large collection of movie posters, and they didn't know what to do with them because they'd never had them before. And she had called all around America to see if they knew any dealers in London. And one of them said, I don't know a dealer, but I know this guy called Tony Nourmand who always calls and buys movies. So I remember this day clearly. She rang. I was in bed. I was unshaven. And she said, oh, I'm Carrie Wallace from Christie's. We've got these movie posters. We're looking for a consultant. Can you come in and value them? I said, yeah, absolutely. Ironed the shirt, put on a pair of trousers, put a price guide under my jacket. And I went in, and I knew movie posters, so I did it. And the auction did well. They called me back in for another auction. And then I set up a gallery with a friend of mine, and that went on for quite a long time until about 15 years ago. And during that time, around 1995, 96, I met this guy called Graham Marsh, who also designed this book. And he used to do books on mainly jazz and design and, the cover art of Blue Note Records, and it was Volume 2, the launch of Volume 2. And I was introduced to him, and he came up to me and goes, do you want to do some books on movie posters? I said, I don't know anything about books. He said, I do. So he came over, we had a conversation, and then I remembered that while I was doing in 1995, the second Christie's sale that I did, that I was the consultant for, was 100 years of cinema. It was a celebration. So the press went crazy for it. Every 5 minutes I was doing an interview. And remember, I wasn't trained. I had never worked, so I was in the shower talking to people. I was on the bathroom talking to,
Amazing.
And one of the people I spoke to was a man called Gabriele Pantucci, who worked for some Italian newspapers. And at the end of the conversation, he said to me, my grandfather was one of the financiers of Rome Open City. I said, I bought a copy of that poster in Sicily. It's the only copy I've ever seen. I sold it to such and such a person in New York. And we had this really nice conversation. And at the end of it, he said to me, if you ever want to do a book, call me, because I find this stuff really interesting. So I went through all my papers. I found his phone number. I called him up. And then he found us a publisher. We went to him. The first book we did was Film Posters of the 1960s. And it did really well. And he said to us, just do one a year, whatever you want. So we did Film Posters of the 70s, Film Posters of the 80s. Then we did horror. Every year we would do one.
Specific genres as well. Yeah.
We could pick whatever we wanted. And his wife, who's Leslie Gardner, after speaking to him, after he found the publisher, he goes, do you mind if I pass you on to my wife? Because she does the same thing as me. She's like an agent. I said, sure. So put me on to his wife, which was Leslie. And Leslie did all my contracts while I was doing books for publishers. And ever since I started rap, she does all of our contracts. So all the people I've worked with, by and large, are the same people. So that's how it started. And then 15 years ago, I was sitting at the gallery one day. The phone rang, and this old man goes, can I speak to Tony Nourmand, please? I said, this is Tony. He said, oh, my name is Bill Gold. I'm a movie poster designer, and I wanted to know if you'd be interested in doing a book on my career. And I said, oh, you're the guy who did Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, and you did Dog Day Afternoon, and something else I knew he had done. He goes, oh, you know my work? I said, well, I know those. What else have you done? He was an art director. He said, oh, the first poster I ever designed was Casablanca. I did Streetcar Named Desire. I did Barbarella. I did Bullet. Oh,
my God.
And then I've done every Clint Eastwood movie since Dirty Harry until today. And he was 90. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, where do you live? He said, Connecticut. I said, do you have everything there? He goes, everything. So the following week I was on a plane. I went to Connecticut. I spent a day there. And I remember distinctly opening up a drawer. And I picked up a file, and in there was it just said Woodstock. And there were 25 designs that were unused on really bad color slides. And I said, what are these? And his wife said, oh, these are all the designs that were rejected by the studio or they was never used. And they were really amazing, and this went on and on, every folder I picked up. And I said, if I do this book, I want to go through everything. And by the time I went through everything, which took a couple of weeks, I didn't know a publisher that would even be willing to pay for the scans of these, never mind color correcting them, and never mind printing it, never mind designing it. So I raised money and I set up Real Art Press, and this is how it started.
And it's still here. And
it's still here.
And Tony, I want to talk to you about the emotional power of some of those posters. You mentioned that when you were working for Christie's as well. And from what I hear, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the value of the original posters, they keep increasing. I mean,
my God.
It's an incredibly good deal if you think about it, right?
It is. I mean, one thing I always used to tell people who used to come into the shop and, you would have 3 posters on the floor and they would go, which one of these is going to go up in value more? And again, my answer would be, if I knew that, I would keep it. Just by their nature, I mean, if you think about it, these posters were designed, they were used to promote the movie, and when the movie was finished its run, they would get sent back to the studios, and when the studios run out of space, it was one of the first things they used to destroy. So by their nature, they're rare. If you go back to the 30s, especially the early 30s, where there was a depression in America, there was a paper shortage, those posters are really hard to find. That's why Frankenstein, Dracula, those Universal horrors sell for hundreds of thousands, because they're, at best, there's 4 or 5 copies known of any of them, And then when you come up to today, basically from around the late 70s, I think the studios or the printers, they woke up to the fact that people have started to collect these. So when a new movie comes out today, you can go on eBay and you can buy the original poster if you know what you're looking for, They still make reproductions immediately, but you can buy the original ones. So just by its nature, the rarer it is, the more popular it is. And if there are not copies of it around, the price is bound to go up. It's as I mean, when I first started, you could buy Bullet, the one you pointed out to me in the book.
Which is so well, yeah.
I think maximum you would have to pay for something like that was like $70. Today, that style is at least 1,000 or 2,000, at least, And that goes with, 18 years ago, I brokered the sale of Metropolis, the Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which sold that for $690,000, which at the time, and today is the highest price ever paid for a poster, not just movie poster. People always, I hate the word memorabilia when it comes to movie posters, because there's always a stigma attached to it. With movie posters, especially how we try to do this book, we really focused on the designers, on the styles, on because it's an obvious thing to say, but you have to remember these things didn't just appear on walls just like that. People sat down, they thought about it. And prior to the internet, I think that when video cassettes came in, if you rented a video cassette, at the beginning of the video, before it started or after, they would have trailers of what else is coming. And then when the internet came in, now you switch on your computer in the morning, you go onto whatever website you want. If you look at the art section, you also know what movie is coming out. So the movie poster doesn't play the same kind of role that it did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, because at the time it was the only source where you could see what was coming out, and it was the job of the designer to excite you, to get you interested, and for you to put your hand in your pocket and buy a ticket. Today, it doesn't play that anymore. That said, there are a lot of young designers, and especially for art house movies, where there's a lot of interesting work going on right now. And I think part of it is because they don't have to rely on that being the only thing. So it gives them freedom to do whatever. And there's some outstanding posters coming out these days.
And I gotta be honest, Tony, I do judge sometimes a film by its poster. I mean, not always. Sometimes I know what the film is about, but sometimes you occasionally, you mention art house films, and I think precisely because they are art house, they're not just a blockbuster. Sometimes you're like, oh, that's an interesting poster. I'm curious, what is actually this film about? I like the colors. If I like the design, I might like the film.
Absolutely, and sometimes the poster is a lot better than the movie.
Yes, I mean,
even when you go back to the 1950s. A poster like Attack of the 50-Foot Woman.
Yes.
I mean, the movie itself, when you put it on, it's like a plastic hand falling on a table, and it's pathetic. It's got a charm, but the poster is as modern today and as iconic today, and it was the day it came out. I think it's instant. Another thing you have to remember: some of the most interesting or iconic images of the past 100 years, like King Kong on top of the Empire State Building, Jaws, Mickey Mouse, all of these images, the first time anyone saw them was on a movie poster. That's something that mustn't be overlooked.
We're talking about films that perhaps are not necessarily the best films ever.
Absolutely not. No.
Jaws 2. I mean, I love it. It's here in the book. I'm trying to find a page because I have to tell the listeners, it is a massive book. I mean, it's heavy. It's incredible. But Jaws 2 is a special one. You have a fun story about that.
Yeah. I spoke to this art director called Tony Nourmand. I'd been in touch with him a while back, or he was in touch with me for something, and I rang him up and I just asked him for information because, it's very hard to find information on who did what. And he was the art director on Jaws, and he also did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Poltergeist and a few other really iconic ones. And while I was talking to him, I said, do you know who did the poster for Jaws 2? And one of the things I really liked about Jaws 2, again, is one of those taglines, which I also love, where it says, just when you thought it was safe to get back in the water. And I asked him if he designed that, and he said no. I said, oh, it's a shame, because I really would love to know who came up with that tagline. And he called me back, and he found it's a lady, it's a woman, but we couldn't find any contact info for her. It was such a thrill for me to actually credit her. The tagline is by Marjorie Dopelt.
That's good. So now she's named here, but it is a fantastic poster, right?
It's poster 715, if you want to find it.
715.
There it is.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Just when you thought, and I love the colors. I mean, this is the kind of poster that, honestly, Tony, I would like to buy it in the future.
No,
that's and there's another one I'm wearing, and I promise this is a coincidence. I'm wearing a T-shirt for the Endless Summer
60th anniversary.
6th anniversary, exactly. I did try to buy the poster in Japan. It was a little bit expensive, but that's
the original poster for that is only this big.
Wow.
Because it was done by Bruce Brown for an art house release. So it's very hard to find the original. But again, years ago, I used to have a stack of them, and you just couldn't sell it back then, Until they're actually pictured and people can actually see them, you don't even know what you're looking for. I mean, that's one of the things that the books did. They brought them to people's attention.
Do you have a favorite decade? I know that's a kind of a difficult question because this book's looking for the last 120 years, more or less, right?
Yeah. No, it's from the beginning.
Yeah, from the beginning, yeah. Any decade in particular that you're really kind of appreciative?
I'm glad you didn't ask me what's my favorite, because that's the one everyone asks, and I can't do that. I mean, I love a lot of decades. I very much like posters from the 40s and 50s for film noir movies, especially the French and the Italian ones. I think they're fantastic. I think the French New Wave period is one of the most creative periods in movie poster design. I also like, it's very hard for me to, what I try to do with this is the creme de la creme of every decade, every genre, as far as I was concerned, It's very hard to narrow it down to that. I wouldn't be able to do that.
For me personally, reading the book, because of course, I was born in the 80s, so I know a lot about the 80s, the 90s. But looking back at the 30s, some fantastic posters here, like The Devil is a Woman by Marlene Dietrich. What a fantastic, I can see this as the cover of a pop album. It's just the colors are so
and just imagine
bright.
In 1936, you're walking down the street and you see that. And again, I love taglines. Read that one.
Kiss me and I'll break your heart.
Devil is a Woman.
Love it. I love it. And she's fantastic.
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story about that poster. I think around after I met that guy I was speaking about, Jose Carpio, who was a poster dealer in San Francisco, I started going to poster fairs here in London, buying things and selling them to him, just to make money on the side because I was unemployed. And that was a poster which this guy in London, for some strange reason, I don't know how it ended up here, he had it. And at the time I bought that he was asking for £2,000 and I didn't have any money. So me and my friend Philip went to his grandmother and we borrowed £2,000. We bought that and I called up Jose and he bought it from us for £5,000. So we made £3,000, which it was like I had the world, And he had it for a while and then he sold it to a collector in New York. And about 5 years ago, I was in New York and the curator at Museum of Modern Art asked me to go in because he wanted to double check a few posters that they had on display because somebody had said one of them was an original. I happened to be there. I just walked in and sure enough, that was hanging at the Museum of Modern Art from the collection of the person who had bought it. And I thought, wow, look at the journey of that thing. It went from a jumble sale here in London to San Francisco, and I had a part in that. And those are the things I used to love when I used to deal in movie posters. It was just documenting them and finding out bits of information about it. But the fact that it had ended up at MoMA and I could see, oh my God, it was in my bedroom,
And do you feel, Tony, of course, people used to appreciate posters all the time, but do you think now with a book like yours, is there more kind of a realization that, you know what, this is an art form and this actually does belong to a museum, for example, from the story you just had? I
100% think that museums do have movie posters now, but it's always the film departments who, there's somebody who's a nutcase like you and me who just loves them and puts them in. But for example, the George Lucas Museum of Narrative Arts, which is opening, I think, next year now, they have a huge collection of movie posters, and that is one of the things that they're concentrating on. And I think it's so important. And then you have Poster House in New York, which opened a few years ago. They don't just do movie posters, they do all kinds of posters. But again, more and more people are becoming aware of this, I think I had a small part in it, and I'm very, very excited by that. Very happy about that.
And people should know, and it is represented here in your book, it's not necessarily just, of course, American or British films or even French, but the Polish. I mean, their posters are incredible, right?
Eastern European, Polish, Czech, Hungarian. One of the really interesting things is when you actually look at, like when we were on Jaws 2, you had the Polish one next to it, which is a completely different mindset. But it also tells you a lot about who they're appealing to and what kind of mindset the designers had. Because obviously, when you get to the big blockbusters of the 80s and 90s, part of the reason why the poster designs dipped slightly is because, somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone might have said in their contract, I want my head to be bigger than the other guys and my name has to be like this. So there are all these restrictions. And at the end of the day, I remember speaking to Bill Gold, because one of my favorite posters of the 90s or that period is Unforgiven, which is just the back of Clint Eastwood with a gun, and it just says Unforgiven August 9th or whatever date it is. And I said, Bill, I remember driving down Sunset Boulevard and seeing this on a billboard and thinking, wow, it's so impactful. And he said that when they designed the poster and showed it to Warner Brothers said to them, we appreciate the design, but we've paid so much money for Gene Hackman and Morgan Freeman, and you have to put their faces on there. So the final poster has that, but it also has these superimposed, and it's garbage, And Clint Eastwood apparently had said, if people don't recognize me like that, they're not going to come and see the movie, so I don't care,
And he's iconic. I mean, people would recognize, actually, in a way. How funny. And it's funny because the 80s, I mean, you have those mega stars, and I have a feeling that now perhaps we're going back to the other times, because they are big stars, but not quite like the 80s, I would say. So recognizable in such ways.
Probably not, because there's so many of them.
Yeah, it's quite spread out.
Yeah, I mean, when Tom Cruise came on, it was like he was,
Is one of the exceptions.
Yeah.
And Tony, okay, this book is amazing, but, if you don't mind talking about Real Art Press, there are many other releases, actually. There are a lot of interesting books as well, if people are interested to have a look.
Yeah, I mean, we do around 6 to 8 books a year. Another book that we're doing, which is coming out in about a month's time, is with the estate of this magnum photographer called Leonard Freed. And in the 1970s, he followed the NYPD for about 2 years. So it's drug busts and police raids, and it really is hair-raising, and I love it. And I've also done another book with Graham Marsh, which was actually his baby, but I worked on it, on denim, actual denim that was worn in America between the mid-30s to the mid-40s. I mean, when I started Real Art Press, especially with doing Bill Gold, one of the areas that really I wanted to concentrate on was everyone knows, or at the time everyone knew these posters, but no one knew who was behind them. So I like showing people something that they weren't aware of before, especially on a subject that they thought they knew. Like movie posters, all these names of people, it's a lot of them have never been written about before, which I'm very proud to have done, And speaking to some of these designers, especially the young, another thing that really excited me was when I rang up some of these young designers, they knew my books, from 25 years ago. They probably weren't even born then. But that was really exciting.
And now they are in it.
Yeah, but we concentrate on design, on photography, and it doesn't matter what the subject matter is, I like the Ivy look, so we do books on that kind of fashion, which is really Graham's thing. We've done a few books on jazz. I've done the official 50th anniversary Led Zeppelin book. We did 50th anniversary Metallica, Queen, but those are different. This is labor of love for me.
Thank you very much, Tony. 1001 Movie Posters, Designs of the Times is out now, published by Real Art Press. And now we head to Lithuania via Sweden. A pleasure to meet in studio Auste Skrupeskit-Cobrand, a founder, strategist, and creative director of Studio Playground, a creative brand marketing studio. She's also the founder of Playground magazine, based between Stockholm and Vilnius. From topics such as the behind the scenes of magazine making to the realities of founding a company solo, it's a great magazine for all creatives out there. Let's hear it from Auste.
So I was going a lot in agencies, in-house on a client side, and 3 years ago went freelance, and then 1.5 years ago established Studio Playground, which is a creative brand marketing studio between Stockholm and Vilnius. So I'm from Lithuania, but I'm based and live in Stockholm. And we actually do everything around the brand. Actually, the idea for Studio was born from personal experience working with agencies, where I felt like a lot of agencies or studios, consultancies were either really good in strategy or production, but there was kind of a gap to understand like everything that comes in between, like see the whole work through from the strategy to the production and the other way around, like how one exhibition or your Instagram or your TikTok channel taps back into the strategy. So that's what we do. We create brand strategy, but also experiences for the brand, so creative concept and exhibitions. We hosted a few exhibitions for clients in 3 Days of Design in Copenhagen and London Design Festival last year as well. So kind of bringing energy into the brands and helping, brands to show a bit more of their ankle and spark because, brands are stories created by people and the teams. And I feel like it's very important to keep both the teams and the brands just more energetic and, showing their true face. And we try to help to do that and show that face through different activations.
And this magazine that I have it in front of me, issue 2 of Playground. So it's not, from what I understand here, it's not just a showcase about what you guys do at Studio Playground. This is something different. This is a way perhaps for you to explore even more the creativity from your team, right?
Correct, 100%. So when we started Studio Playground, the whole studio and actually the magazine was to bring more honesty into creative industries because I felt like there's been so much, sometimes ego, sometimes showing wrong results. I've been once sitting in a meeting when an agency showed that a campaign reached 10 billion people. I'm like, how is that even possible? So the idea was to kind of tap into it. And then the magazine was born also from that honesty to create a product for kind of a portfolio for a studio, because I think magazine is a great project because it includes so many touch points, like finding people, curating people, working with each and every contributor individually, from photography briefs, essays, illustrations, to then also overseeing the whole concept as a totality. And I think that kind of captures Studio Playground pretty well as well, kind of foreseeing the big picture of what is the content, what's the concept, but also working with each and every single detail individually and kind of tapping into both. And then as an extension to it, magazine is also kind of a small business, for seeing how do you communicate the magazine, like how do you distribute the magazine. So yeah, that's kind of how it came to life and tapping into that community of creatives.
How do you distribute the magazine? I mean, has it been a challenge for you perhaps as an independent publisher, or how does it work? Or do you feel quite receptive? Because I feel that we have very good magazine shops these days.
Yeah, 100%. So distribution is everything. I always say I think distribution is what makes a magazine a magazine. That's when you really understand this publication more than just a print. So we distribute, since we're based between Vilnius and Stockholm, and our stock sits in Stockholm, we distribute in EU ourselves. And then we have a distributor in the UK, Public Knowledge Books. So we've been very lucky. We've been pitching the magazine quite a lot before we even had the issue 1 and kind of worked on those relationships. And we are very lucky to find great stores who wants to support us. And it's an interesting journey. It's a bit harder maybe with issue 1, but we had great partners who believed in us, promoted us, sold out. Yeah, we were very lucky we sold out the first issue. So obviously it helped out with the second one to push it even further.
I mean, that's amazing. And tell us, every issue, it seems to me that there is a theme. And issue 2 is clear. I mean, when you open the magazine, you see unicorns and everything. It's all about nostalgia, perhaps memories of childhood. Tell us, how did you use this theme for the new issue?
Correct. So it's quite of a personal topic for issue 2. I've been working on the second issue. And yeah, actually around that time when I was planning to do most of the content, my grandpa passed away. And I ended up going to Lithuania and reflecting about everything. And, I've been thinking about the magazine. And I somehow stepped back and saw that everything we are planning to talk about is somehow connected to memory or to nostalgia or somehow tapped into it. And therefore, I started looking into those stories and the people who wanted to connect and realized that I think not only me, but many people, the older you get, the more you start reflecting about your childhood and memories. It's almost a bit of a cliche. Everyone kind of does that. They say in therapy. But it was more the memories become brighter and you start reflecting who you are and also try to reconnect with who you really are. And I thought that was a very interesting take. And when I shared that with the team and with some contributors, they loved it. We started to find so many stories. And yeah, I hope people will like what we created because we look into it from both perspectives, from both positive, but also maybe a bit more negative. We have one essay from a historian who says that nostalgia is seen as a bad thing, for example, because it's used a lot in politics as well, to create misinformation as well, or, try people to, tap into their memory as well somehow. But yeah, it's a fun topic. I haven't seen much around.
It could be a heated debate about nostalgia. I mean, even some people say, for example, even when you look at the films we see today, that's pure nostalgia as well. The reworks of older films as well, right? If you think about it.
100%.
What about the design? I love the color of the cover. It's quite soothing in a way,
you.
but very, very different from the first one, which was kind of a very kind of bright blue. How would you describe
correct.
it?
It was blue, and we decided we kind of knew our first 3 issue colors, so it was more like picking the shades, and we decided to continue with a bit more brighter, one color, quite clear, bold cover. And I think that this purple really encaptured the topic as well. That was also a very natural connection, because purple is kind of, it has some sort of touch of memory or softness, which maybe connects a bit to childhood as well. And in general, with design, we work with a couple based in Lithuania, Mykolas and Deimantė, their art director and designer, typographer. We worked already before together, and we click so well aesthetically and work on the magazine. I think we're going to work on the magazine as long as, hopefully, very long magazine goes, and try to encapsulate the feel of the playground and, try to bring in the design details that brings the playground elements in and what is play and how can we approach text differently and photography differently and bring in different illustrations together and colors together.
Tell us, I'm curious about the Lithuanian side of things. How is the magazine scene there? Probably you know as much as from Stockholm as well, but how would you say in Lithuania? I'm quite curious. I should have more Lithuanian guests here on the stack.
100%. Can send a list later.
Please.
I mean, we don't have many independent magazines. There are a few others that are more funded by cultural funds, and they're tapping a bit more into art criticism or culture. And otherwise, there, I would say, are almost none. So it's quite, I think, excited for the community there that Playground is coming in and, taking the stand locally, but also globally. And that's very nice. I think for me, that's part of the project as well, to bring in more attention to also Lithuanian creatives, although the magazine has European creatives from more than 30 countries. So we do the mix of everything, But otherwise, we have also a great stationery store in Vilnius called Raštine, who's our big partner. Really recommend everyone going there.
So it's like a stationery shop that has
with magazines as well, and stationery and pens. And yeah, it's a great place, and they do great drinks as well. So I think partners like these are trying to establish the magazine scene as well, and it's been growing.
And I spoke to Nina Prader, the curator of IndieCon, which is happening from the 6th to the 8th of September. You will be there, right?
Yes, we will be there. It's our first fair we're going to attend with Playground. We're going to be there all 3 days from Friday to Sunday, but only on Saturday. We're going to be also selling the magazine, we're going to have a little desk. And also I'm going to be hosting a round table with a topic called Let's Talk Money, which I think is going to be very interesting and exciting to see how, meet other people and talk a little bit more about business side of things around the magazine.
Which is very important, right? Because here on the stack, of course, I want to know about the content of the magazine, but I think it's so important to see that you can have a future making magazines. There is a way, right? Via advertising, subscription, or I don't know, whatever, right?
Exactly. And that's what I want to explore with others around the round table, because there are so many different ways to fund the magazine, starting with it, from either funds or your own consulting business or what's not, and then how to keep it running, So there are so many different business models, and I think everyone is experimenting and trying to find their way. And we are on the same journey. We're going to be experimenting and see what sticks to us and, what works for us as well. So curious to learn from others as well. I'm really excited.
Thank you very much, Auste. Issue 2 of Playground magazine is out now. Auste will also be hosting a roundtable at IndieCon this year, the yearly magazine conference in Hamburg that is happening between the 6th and the 8th of September this year. Tune in to last week's Stack, where I spoke with the curator of the festival, Nina Prader. That's it for this week's show. My thanks to our editor, Jack Dewars. Any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fp@monocle.com. And remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, you can always listen again and subscribe at monocle.com or Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.